Welcome to this Highland League weekly panel discussion where we're talking about all of the Brechin Highland League results from over the weekend, one game on Friday night and 8 games which took place on Saturday. This panel comes from our main press and journal Highland League weekly show, which features 2 highlights games as well as a feature every week. You can access that on the Press and Journal website, but you need to be a subscriber to do so. At the moment though, the good news is you can subscribe for just £1 for 3 months of access, which I think is a very good deal. Do you concur?
I do.
You concur?
Very much so.
They both concur. This week though, if you're watching here on YouTube, we're discussing just the games and the results from Saturday and Friday. We're starting with our main game from Saturday, which was Deveronvale 3, Strathspey Thistle 2. A great 3 points, comeback 3 points from Deveronvale. But I thought, Callum, given Strathspey and how they'd competed in their opening games this season, there were probably positives for both sides to take.
I thought Strathspey first half particularly played well, created some good chances, maybe could have converted more of them on another day. I mean, Aaron Nicholson, who they've sort of got on loan for the time being, he's now with Linlithgow Rothes, but he's still up here just now, so they've got him on loan. He is a good finisher and a bit of a handful. I think probably a decent signing for them, but I think the issue Strathspey have still got, which Ryan Essen will have to work hard to address, is they've still got this sort of propensity when they concede a goal to sort of wilt a wee bit, like Deveronvale scored and then when a minute or so it's 2-2, and in fairness to Strathspey, after that they sort of dug in before conceding late on, but like I still think they need to be harder to play against, harder to beat and have a bit more resolve.
What about the winning goal?
Oh, it's... where do you start? The touch, the Cruyff turn, and then the ball to put it on a plate for the side foot volley home. It's superb, but I have to say the substitutes at half time really turned the game for Deveronvale, because they were kind of going through the paces a wee bit, 2-0 down, but Gary Wood's seen, I need to change this, and the guys who came on have done brilliantly.
As Gary probably touched on a wee bit, Matthew Peterman, who obviously set up that winner, and Adam Reid I think set up the second goal. It's like they're 2 players that have probably been sort of itching for an opportunity, and it's like, in terms of maybe even the timing of Gary's subs, like it's one of them where obviously something needed to change, so he changed it quickly, whereas if you maybe wait another 15-20 minutes and the game meanders along at 2-0 potentially, the subs maybe don't necessarily come on maybe with the same intent, if you know what I mean, if it feels like the game's sort of getting away from you. I think what I was going to say about that as well is, if you look in the sort of recent past, I think that's probably a game in seasons gone by that Deveronvale would have lost for 2-0 down, but obviously new squad and players like Adam Reid being one as well, who's sort of stepping into the Highland League, trying to sort of make a name for himself. Players maybe with a bit of a point to prove as well, and I think that was probably reflected in Vale's second half performance.
Before we move on, we must discuss, as has been touched upon, the change of manager at Strathspey Thistle that came about kind of out of the blue, I still think, even though they'd lost their opening 4 Highland League games. Ryan Essen and player coach Aaron Doran, formerly both of Inverness Thistle, coming in to replace Bobby Beckwith and Ronnie Sharp. I mean, it'll just be interesting to see now, won't it, if they can start to get a tune out of Strathspey consistently in the weeks ahead.
It will be. The thing for me is Ryan Essen's served his time in a lot of ways at Caley Thistle, done his coaching badges, did a good job with the youth team by all accounts, and now he's getting an opportunity to prove himself in the Highland League, and it's a huge task he's taken on in trying to get a Strathspey Thistle side that have kind of treaded water a bit since coming to the Highland League. To get them going would be a huge achievement. Straight away he's shown, look, I need to look at my goalkeeping, which he would know all about himself, being a former goalkeeper, and Ewan Storrier's a good start on that front. Aaron Doran, as a player, will be smashing for Strathspey Thistle. I mean, but it'll be a while before we see him back, if at all, because due to the severity of his injury. But as a coach, I've got no idea. But again, an experienced player at Inverness who was highly thought of.
I think I find the whole sort of Strathspey setup as it is interesting in the sense of, like, Ryan Essen, I believe, was actually doing some work with St Johnstone, and he's in kind of the Premiership, and he's left that to come to Strathspey. So clearly Grant McKellar, that's sort of running the show now at Strathspey, must have big plans and big vision and things, because I don't think you would attract people like Ryan Essen, particularly given the work he was doing at St Johnstone, people like him and Aaron Doran, if there wasn't serious plans in terms of trying to improve on the table. But I find it, the whole thing with Bobby Beckwith and Ronnie Sharp, quite bizarre, in terms of Bobby Beckwith said on multiple occasions over the summer and again after they were dismissed that he was like the head coach, in sort of in quotation marks. He didn't really sign the players. There was the sort of new structure they had. He was, we'll assemble a squad for you, there's people there signing the players, and then him and Ronnie were to work with those players. But now that Ryan Essen's coming in, I've seen that Ryan Essen will be able to sign his players. So Bobby and Ron are nice guys, and I would have had sympathy for them anyway. I kind of had sympathy for them in the sense of they were being you sort of carry the can for not getting a tune out of those players, but it's not necessarily you that signed those players. So I'm interested to see how that sort of works going forward, in terms of does the new manager maybe have more say in terms of the recruitment than what Bobby made out that he had.
Yeah, plenty of chances for both sides, though, as sometimes you don't get in those kind of games.
There was a lot of goalmouth action. Both goalkeepers could sort of leave that with a lot of credit, I thought, in terms of the saves they made. Kind of Daniel Hope and a couple of good ones. I thought Zach Ellis's one near the end for Michael Phillipson especially was a really good save, when he was sort of going across the other way to then spring to his left to save it. I thought that was excellent. I think Locos showed, kind of beaten Buckie already this season, and they showed they can sort of now stand up and compete with these teams, and they are moving in the right direction again. I mean, I thought in the balance a point was probably about right, but it's maybe where both clubs are in the sort of summer business that's been done. Locos are probably happier with a point than Bankside, I would imagine.
I really like Cole Anderson. I think he's coming on to a very good game. He's had a strong start of the season. He's always been like a goal threat, but he seems to be really busy in and around the penalty area now, which is what you want from a guy who's not technically a striker. He's playing off. He's getting forward well and a good threat for me.
Before Cole Anderson scored the equaliser, Bankside obviously went ahead, threw a penalty kick. What did we think of the handball? It was one of those strange ones, was it? I imagine
what
Paul
did he think of
the
handball?
I imagine
That's
Paul
what I'd like
Coots
to
feels
know.
the same way about it. He's probably like, what was I doing?
I don't actually know how it, like... What
Is he putting his hand across to stop the
aye,
player?
We've
Maybe?
been left
Maybe-
speechless. That's what we're saying.
Maybe
here.
he is like trying to sort of like block. I think it's Lachie McLeod, and he's hit the. But I thought even when it happened, like, I think Paul Coots, even when I don't think he even appeals too much. He just sort of goes, "Oh, don't know what I've done there," but he'd probably go the rest of the season and never see another penalty like that. It was bizarre.
Dean Donaldson won't be drawn on this. Callum, you hinted at it earlier on. Now, Locos from within will never be like, we're going to be up there. We're among the top 6. You know, they're just a young developing team that are trying to get better game after game after game. But given the results so far, I know they got beat at Brechin. But result against Buckie, result against Clachnacuddin. Now, are we kind of thinking they'll be in the mix this season up there? Maybe not the title, but maybe top 5-6 teams.
I think they could be in the top 6 potentially, but it's like the amount of teams that want to be in the top 6. It would probably be like a top 10, you know, before the start of the season. Everyone that spoke of it, I think they'll certainly be pushing towards it. I mean, they've had a decent start, 10 points for the first 5 games, and you look at some of the teams that are sort of established in that top 6, like Formartine, Fraserburgh, Buckie, they're obviously further down and haven't had as good a start. So I think, locals, if they perform like that on Saturday, they could be the team that maybe forces their way into that sort of established 6 for last season.
We're only a few weeks into the season, and there's a common theme developing of how competitive this year's league is going to be. I'm really struggling to predict how or where I see certain teams being, because, well, as we'll come to the other results in a minute, there are clubs languishing in the bottom half of the table that might cause you to have a quizzical eye.
It was certainly an interesting weekend. I think probably as we move on to the rest of the games, the result of Saturday, certainly for me, was Formartine United 2, Forest Mechanics 3. Forest went ahead through Matt Jameson, great header. Johnny Crawford and Aidan Coombe, though, they beat it 2-1. Formartine by half-time, Aidan Cruikshank then scored a double. First one was a penalty, the second one was a belter. I don't know if Hugh McDonald, the Formartine keeper, we thought he could have done better with it, but it was a great curling effort from range, and that won it for Forest, and that's another good result for them. Second decent result in a row. I mean, Steve McDonald, I thought it was quite interesting afterwards. Like, he clearly believes his team are capable of performing like that against the big guys, but it's like they showed they were mentally capable of doing it. You know, not, as you mentioned with Strathspey, not just wilting under the pressure of it. You know, they go out there and actually, even with the setback of going behind in the game, having been up, they still find a way to win it. Well,
I think that's what's probably particularly impressive, was because they'd played quite well, Forest, and then got themselves in front and then lost 2 goals sort of in quick succession before half time. And, you know, you've maybe seen other teams in Forest in the past where there's maybe no coming back from that, but they did come back, which is to their great credit. I think, I mean, they've scored 9 goals in their last 2 games, and I think the thing with the players that now have Forest at the top end of the pitch, they will cause a threat. Like Aidan Cruikshank, with the loans he's had when he was at Elgin and one thing and another, maybe hasn't always found it easy, but he's a player of undoubted quality in terms of shooting for range, beating players, deliveries into the box. Kyle McLeod up top's proven at the level, solid performer. Callum Frame, good player. Matt quick, strong, ask questions in behind, and Matt Jameson, somebody who did well at Deveronvale previously, was quite well thought of at Elgin. Forest have done well to get him, so that sort of like front four can ask questions of most teams, which I think would, if you were a Forest supporter, would give you a lot of encouragement. You can, looking at the game on Saturday, talk about Forest and sort of having the resolve and things for Martin, maybe look at moments a wee bit here and there, because at 2-1 Callum Youngson hits inside of the post, and maybe on another day, if that goes in 3-1 early in the second half, for Martin maybe go on, but it can give Forest credit when their chances came along, they took them, and that's an excellent 3 points away from home.
On for Martin, Stuart Anderson himself said it, tough spell at the moment at the start of the season. They've lost 4 of their games so far to Clachnacuddin, Turriff United, Brora Rangers, now Forest. They probably accept 2 of those. You know, they would want to win them all, but they would have accepted 2 of those. 2 of them they won't accept. Where do Formartine go from here?
They need to sort out their defence. I would suggest.
Exactly what I was going to say. They've not kept a clean sheet yet, which is unlike them. And I mean, even the game they won against Rothes, they scored 10, which thoroughly impressive. But I don't think, I mean, he wouldn't be too harsh on the day because you've scored 10. But I don't think Stuart was particularly happy with his defence that day necessarily. So I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I mean, I think the Brora result, you boys touched on it last week, but I think with the sending off in the first 30 seconds or whatever, you kind of write that off a wee bit. But in some of the other games, like they are scoring and they've got threats, but if you're giving the opposition, letting the opposition score as well, it makes it difficult.
I mean, what is it? I think it's scored 15 goals and won one game. That's crazy stuff. They've conceded 15 as well.
Two other teams that we'd probably consider title hopefuls this season dropped points at the weekend as well. We'll start with Clachnacuddin 0, Fraserburgh 0. The big news from this one, of course, is nothing to do with the result. It's the fact that Gavin Morrison, highly experienced midfielder, signed by Clach in the summer. It looks like he's suffered a serious knee injury and could be out for the rest of the season. Just 10 minutes in his first start for the club, wasn't it, Paul?
Yeah, Conor Githens was certainly not expecting to see Gav back, and it's a big blow. There's been a lot of focus on the experience that's come in. I think Josh Meekins was the sponsors man of the match, because that's what Clach have been needing from last season, is to get some older heads in, guys that can really help carry the younger lads when they go and gets tough in a game. And Fraserburgh would be a good example of that. It's a tough afternoon normally, but Clach have, I think, hit the woodwork twice and feeling like they should have won it. And they've kept Scott Barber quiet. There's lots of things that they were happy about, but yeah, Gav Morrison's injury has overshadowed that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think Gav Morrison was a bit of a sort of statement signing for Clach in the summer in terms of had a really sort of good career and with Brora and things, but even the last couple of seasons when he's been down at Spartans, he hasn't had much luck with injuries, and it's kind of unfortunate for him and for Clach that that's continuing. And if he doesn't kick a ball again this season, it's clearly a big loss. I think in terms of the game, Clach with their chances, I think James Anderson, when he hits the crossbar, probably should score. I mean, Joe Barber came out and he was maybe a wee bit unsighted, but I think he would normally expect to score. Troy Cooper was a wee bit unlucky, hitting the post. It was a pretty good effort, I thought. But after losing to Locos and to Nairn, that was more like it again for Clach, and I'm sure if he'd offered them the clean sheet against Fraserburgh before the game, they'd have taken it. For the Broch, I mean, we were on about Formartine and conceding goals. For Fraserburgh, scoring seems to be the issue. Like, they haven't scored in 3 of their 5 league games, which I think you'd have gotten long odds on that before the start of the season. And I mean, it's maybe easy to talk about players that aren't there and things, but Ryan Sargent was a big player for them in the last couple of seasons, and he's nae there. And it's like they've got Scott Barber, Sean Butcher, but you sort of feel a wee bit like players round about that, whether it's Connor Wood, who scored in midweek against Forfar, or Aidan Sopel, or Logan Watt, Ken, the sort of Josh Bolton, the other sort of forward players they've got, they maybe need to step forward a wee bit and produce a bit more, because I don't think you can maybe just rely on don't think like as good a player as he is, I don't think you can just rely on like a Scott Barber all the time. And like we were talking about it earlier, but like James Duthie's quote after the game was quite interesting in terms of if he'd said to Fraserburgh he'll keep clean sheets against Brechin and Clach, they'd have probably expected, right, we should score, we should get 6 points out of those 2 games, and they've only got 2. So just that consistency in the final thirds, what's missing for them. And I mean, it is still early in the season, and you know, same applies to Formartine a wee bit, but it's already like right now I think the Broch are 9 points behind Brora, and it's like, although it's still early doors, like if you want to be up there challenging, it's a lot of ground to have to claw back as well.
Yeah. Buckie Thistle 2, Wick Academy 2 was the other game in which one of our title hopefuls dropped points. I mean, the dramatic finish to this one was Kyle Henderson for Wick's sumptuous free kick, which you're hopefully seeing on your screen. right now. There were 2 goals in 4 minutes in the first half, which turned it around for the Jags. So they've gone behind to Ryan Campbell's 10th minute opener, but they got their goals through Lyle Keir and Ryan Fife. Sounded like maybe similar to Formartine, that Buckie could then have, gone on and get a third goal, and that, that maybe puts a different spin on things, but they didn't, and that gives Kyle Henderson the opportunity to make what a mark on the game. But was this the free kick as well that was given because Mark Ridgers handled the ball outside his box?
It was, I believe.
A bit of a stupid way to give away a free kick as well, isn't it?
It seems like, I think from what I've read, there was a bit of a defensive mix-up which led to that, but even though they gave away the free kick, I don't think you'd necessarily expect to be punished in the way that Kyle Henderson did punish Buckie, but he's a player, maybe not necessarily always consistent, but he is a player, as he showed there, that can light up any game. Got a real touch of class about him, and for Wick, with their sort of spoken about a lot last season, I think they only, didn't pick up many points away from home. A point at the Champions, you can't really argue with that. It's a great result for them.
Why are left-footed players so good?
Well, as a left-footed player myself. No. I must be the exception to that rule.
Actually.
I am a left-footed, yes.
Gonna remember that for future. Brechin City 2, Huntly 1. Brechin did get their 3 points. Just churn them out, don't they? Lewis Martin and Mark Scott had them 2 up at the break. Sounded like a pretty late Angus Grant consolation for Huntly, but it was described, and it's the first time we've said it this week, as a game of 2 halves. I think it's the first time we've said it this week. Sounded like Huntly, Colin Charlesworth wanted them to be braver, and he got that performance in the second period, but it wasn't quite enough to turn things around.
It's tough because when you go to the Glee Park, we speak about this all the time. The last thing you want is to go a goal down, because it's true though.
But when teams are more aggressive, you always see it always turns out better for them.
Yeah, absolutely. But they're 2-0 down before they can get going, and it's a big uphill task against a very good side who are very good at keeping the ball and making you work hard to get it back. Both managers will be relatively pleased. It's obviously not been a sparkling performance from a Brechin point of view, but they've done enough to win the game. Huntly haven't been swept aside. They've been competitive, and who knows if that goal had maybe come 10 minutes earlier, or we're getting a late hurrah and a draw. I think both managers will be reasonably happy with that one.
I think he couldn't, the draw at Fraserburgh, but I don't think he could really fault Brechin's start overall. Kind of look very good, I think, and a sort of well-oiled machine that you would expect. I think for Huntly, that's second week in a row where it's like run Buckie close last week, and then it's third. He's sort of saying they've competed against Brechin, but it's like trying to find ways, and it was maybe a wee bit of the same second half of last season for Colin Charles, was trying to find ways to just turn those into draws or wins and start putting points on the board.
Lossiemouth 0, Brora Rangers 2. Sounded like Stuart Knight on his debut for Lossiemouth in goal. Made quite a few saves in this one eventually, though, in the 72nd and 74th minute. Craig McKenzie and Jordan McRae got goals for Brora, as well as the Stuart Knight side of things. Another sign, though, given how much threat Brora have showed in their early games, that Lossie do seem to be quite organised under Eddie Wilecki Black, as Lossie tend to.
They're a tough nut to, they look to be a tough nut to crack. I'll be interested to get a proper look at Lossie under their new manager. But being a tough nut to crack's one thing. Like, if you got enough of an attacking threat at the other end, is the bit that's maybe we're not quite seeing from the coasters for me. Having said that, Brora, you used the phrase well-oiled machine. That's what comes into my head when I think about Brora at the minute. They're chuntering out week after week, 3 points wherever they're going.
Yeah, they look like they mean business, and I mean, there was a couple of folk connected with Brora where, what would I say, when I was speaking to them before the season started, were quietly quite bullish about this new era, and so far, I mean, it looks like their optimism wasn't misplaced, because even like maybe didn't have the sort of the sort of flashiness of previous performances, but to go down to Grant Park, keep another clean sheet, and find a way to win, can't really ask for much more. And again, it's like early in the season, but it's amazing how far a good start can take you in terms of getting points on the board early and getting yourself up there and sort of in the running. And I know you probably come back to it in another couple of months' time if you're still up there, but just getting off to that fast start help, like in terms of confidence and everything like that's a big thing. And I mean, you've seen teams, Brora obviously usually fancied to be up there, but you've seen in years gone by teams who maybe weren't necessarily fancied have either gone on and won the league or gone very close to it on the basis of sort of making a flying start, and that momentum just carries you right through the season.
They'll obviously have that boost to come at some point as well of Shane Sutherland potentially being fit and able to come at the team. Given how many goals they're already scoring, that's quite frightening for their rivals.
Well, Shane's a very good player. He earned his move back to Highland Thistle on the back of a terrific run at Elgin City. If he gets himself fit again, he'll be a real handful at Highland League level, and he offers him a different option. He likes to run in behind, he can hold it up, he's a big strong guy, and he knows the way to go. He's going to be a great addition once he's back and firing on all cylinders, I'm sure.
Keith 0, Turriff 1. Turriff of the two teams were the one that managed to record back-to-back 1-0 victories following last weekend. Got that right, didn't I? They both won 1-0 previous weekend. Come on. A first Turriff victory at Clachnacuddin Park, we're told for 7 years. I never checked it. Did you check it, Callum?
In the league it's 7 years, but there was an Aberdeenshire Cup win in 2018 that I saw this morning, I believe, August 2018, so it's like, I think it's 6 year, but I mean, it's a long, it was actually a first, that's Turriff's first win since then against Keith at home or away, which quite a run when you think about it. Two sort of teams a lot of the time being in that sort of middle part of the league and quite competitive. Sounded like it was very much, to borrow your favourite cliche, game of two halves, but I mean, Keith first half on top and great chance obviously to go in front. They did a penalty which Lee Herbert I thought made a decent save from Liam Duncan, and Mikey Taylor had a couple of decent chances as well he didn't take, and then Turriff for a better second half. But it's like Craig Ewan's quote after the game probably summed it up quite well in terms of he felt like time was ticking down, couldn't see where a goal was coming from. In that situation you're thinking, well, at least draw the game, don't lose it, and they've lost it. And I mean, for Turriff, a great 3 points. I think it was 90 minutes last week and something like 86 this week, so they've maybe got that wee knack of scoring late goals, but certainly Keith, I think, were pretty distraught with losing the late goal and the sort of defending which led to it.
One more game to discuss from the weekend's fixtures, which took place, as earlier mentioned, on Friday night. It was Nairn Kempney 2, Rothes 3. Big result this one for Rothes. Scott Lyle and Matthew Wright had Nairn 2 up in the first half an hour, but Ross Logan scored either side at half time, and then Jake Thompson won it. Some of the goals were nice, but I suppose if you're Richard Hastings, who said after the game he felt that they were 2-0 down, the Rothes boss, from doing very little wrong, he still had belief in them, and ultimately that belief was vindicated when his team went on to win the game. On the other hand, if you're Nairn, it's one of those results that you're like, God, we're 2-0 up in that game, we've come away with nothing.
Well, sorry.
I was just going to say, after half an hour, I was thinking that this is maybe Nairn getting their season up and running. It's been a tough start for Ross Stokely going in at Station Park. But yeah, it was a great comeback from Rothes. What
were you thinking about Rothes after that first half an hour? Were you thinking that you knew how that was going to play?
Well, because Rothes have had to take some sore ones already this season, so it was looking like it was going to be another tough afternoon or evening as it was for Richard Hastings and his players. But no, credit where it's due. To get back into the game is great, but to come all the way back and win it away from home is a fantastic result for them.
I think Richard's quotes are quite interesting because in terms of finding themselves behind with doing very little wrong, I think having watched the highlights and spoken to people that were at the game, I do think first half Nairn were well. I think again game of two halves. I think first half Nairn were well on top, and then Rothes I think got the left nail on before half time. Ross Logan scored a tremendous goal, and his second was almost as good as well. And then second half, Rothes were the team in the ascendancy, and they found a way to win it. And if you think about the sort of last few weeks, they've had one on the opening day, chip 10 against Formartine, lost in the last minute to Lossiemouth, and then beaten by Keith last week. To sort of have that resolve and that sort of dig to find a way to come back, I mean, it helps when you've got Ross Logan, who just seems to have that knack at the moment of scoring screamers, but to have that dig to come back's a great credit to what is a pretty young team. Because I mean, you look at the side it started as well, and there was no Charlie McDonald, no Gregor McDonald, no Greg Morrison, and then also like Ben Johnson, Alan McKenzie, who've been out longer term. But it's like you take those players out, and they're big players for Rothes. So to come back in that way without them is a great credit to those that played on Friday. I think for Nairn, I mean, being on top as they were, to sort of relinquish control would disappoint them. I think it's been a pretty underwhelming start for Nairn actually, in terms of, you look at the summer business, Ben Barron, Matthew Wright, Scott Lyle coming back just last week, Alan Pollock, Gary Kerr, signed a lot of good players to what was already a decent side. And so far it hasn't really clicked. I mean, they didn't lay a glove on Brechin. They were well beaten in the second half against Bankside last weekend. Beat Clach, which was a good result for them. But then on Friday, as you sort of touched on, it looked like it was clicking for them, and then they've sort of let it slip. So I think there's a bit of work to be done there, a bit of gelling for Nairn in terms of there's no doubt in my mind they've got a lot of good players in that squad, but it hasn't quite happened so far this season.
Sounds like that was a third game that crossed the game of two halves threshold, that one, potentially.
It's a Highland League for you.
Yeah, not just goals, but even content. Even
cliches.
Yeah, cliche contest. Anyway, let's have a look at the Brechin Highland League table as things are now. That then is all of the weekend Highland League results analysed, both Saturday's games and the one game that took place on Friday night. Hope you've enjoyed this analysis. If you have, we'll have another panel from the coming weekend's action out on YouTube next week. If you'd rather though watch the main Highland League weekly show complete with highlights and our weekly feature, you can gain access to that over on the P&J site by becoming a subscriber, and you can do that for just £1 for your first 3 months. If you don't want to do that, I think it's quite a good deal and you should do it, but if you don't want to do that, that's fine. As I said, the panel will be here next week again and in all subsequent weeks. In the meantime, until you see us next, wherever you see us, you can follow us on X at HighlandLW. You can also sign up to our Facebook group, which is under the handy title Highland League Weekly. There's also our email newsletters, which will give you all of the latest updates from the Press and Journal, including all of our latest Highland League and Highland League Weekly content. There's a link below this video to sign up for those newsletters. In the meantime, enjoy the football, whichever games you're watching, and we'll see you next time.